I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
All right.
Hi, Mr. B.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I don't have any power.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, so I'm I'm kind of in my dark, and I don't feel like going to pull on no generator. So I'm
Oh
just
my God.
so I'm hoping to be
Wow.
back on in about an hour. So I got a hotspot and I got a phone and everything is up to date. So we're good to go.
Wow. How long has this been?
20 minutes, 15
20
minutes.
minutes.
It'll be
Okay.
back. Yeah, it'll be back on probably in an hour.
Wow. Okay.
Hey, Kev, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mr. B, how you doing, man?
I am good. And my buddy Steve, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Bernard?
I am good.
Hey, Kevin Sparrock. Hello, Kevin Wilkerson. I'm going to do it right this time.
Hey, Ellen.
Joe Thompson, how are you, sir?
I feel blessed, sir. God woke me up this morning.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Amen. Hey, is it raining down there in Jersey?
Not yet. Not yet.
Oh man, it's pouring up here, man.
We're
Yeah.
expecting it around 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I think we should be done by then. Hopefully we'll have lights back by then. We will be starting. Let me see what we got here. We'll be starting in a minute, and if you don't mind, and then we'll get started. We got a good show for us tonight to listen to, I hope. And I think that it will be very interesting for a lot of folks who take it serious. How's the weather down in Houston, Kat?
So far, so good down anyway, Mr. B. We haven't experienced anything dramatic yet. Obviously, down towards the Galveston area and Beaumont, a little bit worse, but in Houston, so far, so good personally.
Okay. TJ,
How you doing?
what's up, buddy?
How's it going, man?
Good, nice to see you.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Always, always. Sean, you know TJ, Sean?
Huh.
All right, let's get started. First and foremost, I want to welcome everyone this evening. My co-host is Ralph, referee Rant, is on the line with us. And I would love to say hello to him as well as we prepare. I'm having a tornado up here where I live at, up in Orange County, New York. And so I don't have any lights, but I have a iPhone and a hotspot and iPad and a little bit of flashlights, and I don't want to feel like getting a generator. So I feel like we're good for the next hour and a half. So I'm looking forward to this session and getting us all through. Modest, how are you, sir? Are you rained out down there in New Rochelle?
Mount Vernon, but it's starting to happen. It's getting dark, and I can feel it. It's on its way.
Okay, all right. Maybe to get away from me and get one down there to you.
Yeah, my lawn really needs it.
I hear you. Good. So welcome, everyone. My name is Bernard Bowen. I'm a member of Board 42, president and owner of Bball Referees. I am hosting this with Ralph, the referee Rant, and we're going to get started. We got a great topic tonight. It's called, what is financial literacy for referees? And I think that's a great topic. I thought about it. Ralph and I talked a little bit about it. As you all know, that I am a ex-banker, investigator, and all that kind of stuff. So I am very much involved in the financial community. I teach financial literacy. So I thought this would be a great topic for us as referees in the referee community to talk a little bit about. So Ralph, would you like to say something before we get started?
Yeah, just good evening, everyone. Hope all is well. Hope everyone's still staying safe in these crazy times. I'm a proud member of Board 41 in Nassau County, as well as a proud member of Board 119 in Queens. This is one of the things that I know that Bernard is very passionate about. And this is also a topic that I'm very passionate about because, you talk about refereeing, it always goes hand in hand because we talked about earlier about the love of the money and the love of the game. Sometimes you still got to make money and you still got to figure out how you're going to filter those types of monies into your account. So I thought this was important, especially like somebody like Bernard with somebody you can really lean on for the subject matter. So I'm really interested to hear what you got, Bernard. Thanks for doing this.
Yes, sir. All right. So what is financial literacy for referees? What do we need to know? What is the difference between a W-2, which is a tax withholding from your employer? What's a 1099? It's a miscellaneous income. Miscellaneous income comes with a 1099 tax return. When it comes with that tax return, come the first week of February or sooner. Should not be later than that. If anyone do not have their phone on mute, can you please put it on mute, please? Thank you. Okay, we should be fine now, hopefully. The other means of how we earn certain incomes is cash. And one thing that we need to understand is there's two vehicles that are driven by W-2 tax withholdings in the referee community. That's the NBA and that's the WNBA. All other referees are what we call independent contractors. Now, as an independent contractor, you're a business. And what you may want to start to think about is getting an LLC to having your business. So when we talk about having an LLC, it's a limited liability, and we have a guest speaker that's going to give us a little bit more insight on that end of it, who's a CPA, and I'll introduce him. He's on the line already, and he will go through a little bit more in details regarding that LLC piece of it. But you are an independent contractor, and it is your business as a referee. Anytime you go out to referee and somebody hand you a check, believe me, they're going to send you a 1099 at the end of the year. And you must claim that on your taxes. So that means when you work 4 different conferences, high school games, rec leagues, some rec leagues give you a 1099, some rec leagues give you cash. All funds should be accounted. All funds should be counted. I mean cash and checks, because cash hurts a lot of referees. We know we like to have cash in our hand and we take it and we're happy with it, but there come a point when you go to purchase a home and you tell that banker, I made $100,000, but your W-2 came up to 79 and your 1099s came up to make you 99. And he looks at you and he says, where's the 100? And that 100 is the cash that you would have had to show your true cash. Now, when we get to the other piece of it that's very important for us to understand is, how do we handle our yearly taxes? When you're a 1099 and you're an independent contractor and you have an LLC, as an independent contractor with an EIN number, you will need to pay quarterly taxes. If you choose not to do it, it's okay, but you're penalized at the end of the year. You may not be told that, you may not know that, but you are. It's very minimal, but you are. So you can pay quarterly taxes. So how do you handle that yearly taxes? What do we really want to understand with it? We want to understand you should include all income, including cash income. Why do we claim all of our income? Because of the fact that their write-offs are your deductibles of all of your income. Now, as a sole proprietor of your LLC, as an independent contractor, you can take that and put that with your W-2 because you are the sole proprietor of it. But that allows you, with that independent contractor status, to be able to write off your deductions that you're allowed to as an independent contractor. A lot of us don't write off our write-off deductibles that are allowed us as independent contractors. We all don't know them all, and there may be some that I'm gonna miss, and our guests will probably give us a little bit more information. But let's start with, you pay referee dues every year, that's a write-off. You buy your uniform, you buy your referee shoes and your gear, that's all equipment that you can write off. You go to camps, you get a receipt or you pay by your credit card, that's a write-off. Then when you turn around, you think about your meals when you're traveling. How about your airline ticket from one city to another to go to a camp? Those are all write-offs. When you're driving from one job to another, you can write off the miles. Now you can write off gas or you can write off miles. My recommendation, and you make your own, and you're with your accountant who does your taxes, but from my knowledge, you'd use the Fed rate and you are better off using the mileage. I had a question come to me earlier and they were asking, what if I leave my car and rent a car and can I write it off, the car? Absolutely, that's part of your business expense. But the miles that you used in that, you can write that off as well because you used the miles. You didn't just pay for the car, you drove the miles. Now, when you look at additional write-offs that you could think about is your education. When you take time out to do certain things with reading material, you may purchase software. All of that is deductible under your allowance to do those deductibles. Now, here's some additional things that I think that you got to realize before we get to some of the pros of it. If you own a home or you have an apartment and it's a space enough for you to have a small office, you could write off a portion of that. You have a cable bill in that house, you can write off a portion of that. You have a cell phone bill, you can write off a portion of that, or your cell phone bill if that's all for the business. You should think about your insurance. Why not get additional insurance? Even though your IABLE insurance is there, you can get individual insurance because you may do other venues. You don't need to be an LLC to write them off. That is true. You don't need it, but it's good to have. It's very important to hold on to your receipts. All of your receipts are part of your backup. But this is what I tell folks. Once you open up an LLC, which I think it's a good thing to do, or you open up a credit card and use it just for business, don't put other things on it so this way you can track and you get a monthly statement and you can offset your monthly statement with your expenditures that you may have occurred And this way you can go ahead and reconcile it. And at the end of the year, when you're getting ready to do your taxes, all you got to do is print out 12 statements. And then you can reconcile from that 12 statements of where you've spent money on what write-offs and what categories they should fit in. The other thing that I think is very important for us to understand, most referees don't claim cash. And they don't realize it, that it can hurt you later on if you don't claim it all. Because when you go to purchase a home and they look at your income coming in and you never claim the cash, you may not ever have a referee who says, I'm just an official and I referee every place, and he makes, say, $100,000, but 50,000 of it was in cash, and he got another 50,000 in checks, and he's doing taxes on only $50,000. Now he goes to buy a home, and they ask you for the last 2 years of your 1040 form. They look at your total income, and they're saying you only got 50,000, and you're saying, no, I make 100,000. You didn't claim your cash. So it can hurt you for not claiming it if you're trying to buy big tickets. That same thing goes along with trying to get a loan. Same thing, even if you're purchasing a vehicle. And sometimes when you're purchasing, they ask you for certain documentation to go along with it. If you're going to refi your home, those are things that they look for to try to find out. So it is important to understand everything that you get in. You may forget if it's one game, it's a $50 bill, so what? You walk away, it's not a big deal. But if you have a multiple number of games and you got something that you may come down the road, you want to make sure that you have some accountability for what you're doing. Deductions will clear that off anyway, but you need to understand where it's coming from and how to utilize it. Any questions so far out there?
Hey,
Okay.
Bernard, hold on. Zach
Yes.
Murphy had a question. I know Steve
Okay.
had the opportunity to answer, but I wanted you to fill in. Do we have to file an LLC in order to write off those travel expenses and camp expenses? Or can we save those receipts?
No, you do not. No, you do not need to. You don't have to get an LLC. You can write those deductions off on your regular 1040. But there's a Schedule C that needs to understand that's your miscellaneous income. And our guest speaker tonight will give it a little bit more detail about it. But you need to have knowledge of what a 1040 return is and what's a 1040 long form Schedule C, which is miscellaneous income. And a big thing that a lot of folks don't understand, when you have miscellaneous income under a 1099 status, what happens is, because it's, cash or miscellaneous income, it's not a W-2. When somebody's looking at your portfolio under a miscellaneous income only, they only take 70% of a $100 bill because it's not sustainable income. So when we're getting ready to do these things and buy big ticket items and we're not putting it all in, and then we're saying we're not getting approved, and you say, I did this, but last year I did that. That is why, if I am meaning correctly, a couple of weeks ago, Donnie was on and we were talking about that. We're talking about just officials doing officiating and how important it is to have, how important it is when you're having a W-2 to go along with the miscellaneous income on a Schedule C. So this way you can understand that in these down times, you're still generating revenue. It may not be the job that you're gonna have for your career, as officiating may be what you want to do as a career, but at least you have some sustainable income. So when you go to apply for something, when they look at your portfolio and they take a snapshot of who you are, they can say there is a number that we call sustainable, because you can justify the miscellaneous income, but you got to understand how to read it and understand it. And again, It's not rocket science. It's just putting a little effort into understanding what you are doing. Are there any questions out there? Okay. What I would like to do.
I think Dave Barker had a question.
Okay.
When documenting mileage, do you use the mileage for round trip or only mileage to the site?
If you go to the site, how do you get home?
Dave?
You claim both ways. That's a total trip.
Point of information. If you're coming from your regular job and then you go to a game, you could only document the mileage from your regular job to the game, not from your game to your house.
Absolutely. So you're already out of the house. So from the location of that job that you got that W-2 from, wherever it is, that's where you go to that location that you're officiating and then home. Yes, you're absolutely right, Vic. Thank you. Any other questions out there? I know it must be some questions.
One question, Bernard, about getting back to the LLC. Is the LLC, do you put that in place so you're taxed at a lower threshold than you would filing just the 1099? Is that the main purpose of the LLC?
No, the LLC, it just differentiates that you have a business and you're living in a business dome. Because if you look at an LLC, you have 2 digits and then you have the rest of the 7 digits. On your social security number, you have 3 digits, then 2, and then 4. So that's how they identify that EIN number instead of a social security number. Now, if you're looking, it just separates your traffic of where you're actually having funds coming in.
Oh,
and you're automatically taking yourself into a business. It's a safety valve also for individuals who have a lot of assets under their own home.
Right.
Everything else is done under the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, so if you do it from a business standpoint, we are a business. Refereeing is a business. And what will happen at times, you will actually sometimes be told by a bank if you go in and it so happens your account is flagged, because your account can be flagged because they see business activity in a personal account. You understand? So in other words, if you're paying a bill, they can see it's a bill. But if you're using your checking account, which is your personal account, to be paying, and like if I'm paying all the referees out of my personal account, sometimes the bank will come to a person and say, you have to separate because one is a business and one is personal. So that's from an assigner standpoint. From an individual standpoint, if you're just receiving and you want to keep it separate and you want to be paid separate under that tax ID number, an LLC, and you don't even have to get an LLC, but you can get an EIN number. You don't even have to have an LLC to get an EIN number. You get a separate business number. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. I may have misunderstood the mileage thing, the last thing that was said about it. Understand that you said if we're already at work, we go from work to home, work to the venue. And do we calculate from the venue back home, or we don't calculate that at all?
You work from the venue back home.
Okay.
Okay, so say for instance, the venue could be across the street from your house.
Right.
But you work downtown. But you had to leave from work, right? You had to leave from work to come back. So you're home already. You only count in one way.
Right.
And you always use the government rate.
What'd you say? Always use the what?
The government rate. If you go on the internet and look for mileage under the government, and it's 0.57. per mile. If you go from state to state, and somebody just said something about state to state. Question?
So it's 57 cents a mile. That's the rate Bernard was alluding to.
Thank you very much, Vic. Now, just to understand some of the things that is important for us to understand with this whole scenario is that there are deductibles or items that can be deducted because you only pay taxes on what's left over. So I always used to hear people say this, I only do cash games. And for me to tell you, as a person that's been around this for a long time, doing cash games don't do anything for you that an LLC besides put money in your pocket right away. And putting money in your pocket for one game or two games is not going to make or break you. So when people start getting offended about getting a check and getting a 1099 that they can write off the expenses for doing it, they're defeating the whole purpose of you being a business person. And if you got to think as a businessman or woman in the referee community, because there are deductions, because any person who owns a business, there are deductions that come out of that business, what we call business expense. And that business expense comes from the things that you have to purchase to referee that game. That business expense comes from how you got to the game. That business expense comes from what you're wearing during the game. And we have to understand that we go out and we buy tapes. We go out, we listen to seminars. You know, we use our phone to get messages. Those are things that you got to understand. It's an asset to you. It's not a liability. And the other piece that you got to think about from the bigger picture of it is that when you are a person trying to purchase something, it is so important to show all of your income, because a lot of folks don't explain to you that sometimes getting, as they I don't know if any of you know about this, about predatory lending, where brokers or bankers or whatever will put you in a position that you cannot afford just because you want to get into a home. And sometimes you want to show that you can maintain that home. And the way that you show it is by showing your 1099 or miscellaneous income, that you always can go back to your 1040 and your Schedule C, and you'll see the breakdown of where it comes from. You'll start to see all the breakdown of where all the different expenditures come from. You know, always remember that your income, your total income after your deductions is what you're going to pay taxes on. So it's important for you to not to feel afraid that you're claiming everything, because at the end of the day, the meal that you had dinner, you had the meal that you had a meal that you may have had with another referee or someone that you just met that's talking officiating could be a business expense. There are writable write-offs that we can justify as just being a referee, discussing our referee career or business while having a meal. Now, the one thing you don't want to underscore is that when you see folks who take and they put a whole lot of deductions and you didn't make that much money. And that's when you see people that take and they will take a lot of and write off a lot of expenditures, and those are red flags for auditors. And when you're being audited, you got to be able to explain, and that's why keeping your receipts, or the bigger thing that I would say is one of the reasons why you have a separate credit card just for basketball, just for your business expense. Because now you can identify if you ever get caught into an audit, you just go get your statements, pull your statements together, and you go ahead and deal with the audit. Do not be afraid to do an audit, to go through an audit. As long as your documentation is well kept, and the best way you can do that is to keep it in one place so you can identify and reconcile everything that you have at one place. Are there any questions?
Vernon, I give you a point of information.
Yes.
When you are driving to a game, because they ask for a log. So wherever you go, in reference to a business expense when you're driving, you have to put a log, the beginning mileage and the end mileage. And a good way to remember is take out your cell phone, take a picture of your speedometer, and then when you get to the place, you take a picture of it again. Then when you get back home, take a picture of it again, and that will give you the date of when you took the picture and the mileage, and then at the end of the week, you could log all your numbers right into a little form and you're fine. And then when they ask you, well, how did you do on this date? You pull out your phone, you say, I took a picture and blah, 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 blah. And auditor will be fine.
That's great, Victor. Thank you. One other thing that from another way to look at some of that is if you know that, say, for instance, you're not working and you got referee schedules, what you can do for that month, you know where your schedule is, what games you've been assigned, and you're at home. All you got to do is MapQuest and take that MapQuest and staple that into the folder for your monthly log. And that way, when the month is over, you can print out your statement, put that monthly log in there, and that will track all of your stuff. Because if you ever get audited, now you have to go back and try that to pull all that information. Now you got to remember where your schedule was. So for a habit, one of the things you may want to think about is always knowing that you could just jump on a folder, and that folder should tell you everything that you need to know. Hold on, is with the details that you have inside that folder and give you all the details that you need to know about where you're traveling from. Because then you also attach that to that it was basketball related. It wasn't just you writing down miles. That makes sense?
Hey,
Also,
Bernard,
one of the things
Bernard, a good way to track that too, as I've always done, or I've talked to with other stuff I've done, is keep it in some type of Excel sheet. You know, set up a template early. You know, put what you're doing, set up different tabs, put the dates on there, put the cost on there. You can save it down. You can reference it, email it to yourself. So frankly, you can reference it anywhere. Do it. If you have time, do it after every trip. If you don't have time, do it once a week. Then at least, to your point earlier, then, just kind of take a picture or staple that receipt that you have and stick it in a folder. So, it's tough to do if you kind of let that stuff accrue throughout the year. It's a lot of stuff to gather, but if you keep track of it and you do it once a week, once every trip, once a month, it makes it much more manageable. So then you can just easily go back and reference and say, here's the date, here's my game, here's what I spent, here's the money I spent for dinner, here's the money I spent for lodging, and so, et cetera.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Great job. So we're going to go into a lot of other questions, but before I turn it over, this young man, I am very proud of, got to meet him, and we spoke and we've been talking over the phone, and just so happened I worked a couple of cases myself with this firm, and to find out he was working with the firm, and he's a CPA, he's a referee, he has some trials and tributes, and he has some stories that he can share with you that we shared with one another. But I want to introduce Kevin Wilkerson from down in Houston, CPA from Deloitte, and he can give us a little bit more detail and pick up some of the things that I may have missed out on and speaking on. So Kev, without ado, please say hello and give us some more feedback on this financial side.
Hey, thank you, Mr. B. I really appreciate the introduction. I will say I don't have much left to give because you did a very good job of covering a lot of these topics. But I do my best to try to fill in the gaps and kind of go with the original material that I had planned. But as Mr. B said, I am out of Houston, Texas right now, although I do not claim this is my home. I am a native of Mississippi. Been in Houston the last 10 years or so. Before moving to Houston, my officiating career actually did start in Mississippi where I worked about 4 or 5 years before relocating out here to chase my career as a CPA. And since then, I've been out here in Houston the last 10 plus years. Probably been officiating, I would say maybe 8 of those years in Houston. Refereed about 5 years. Then my mom suffered a stroke back in Mississippi, so I returned home for a while and just got back on the court about 3 years ago. So kind of in my third phase of officiating, but through it all, I've been working in public accounting, as Mr. B indicated. So without further ado, trying to jump into this conversation that I think he's done a fantastic job on highlighting the financial literacy aspects of officiating. If you'll see, I actually went and borrowed my son's board because I'm just a big whiteboard guy. So if you see what I got drawn up here, it's just a picture of a hand, nothing more, just a hand. And the reason I wanted to put a hand on here is if you think about in officiating, we use our hand more than anything else. We use it for fouls, we use it for violation, we use it for directions. But you think about it, at the end of the day, once we get through calling the game, we got our hand out looking for our paycheck. We got our hand out looking for our cash. So I wanted to make sure that we can resonate with the hand and think about what that actually means. So there are a few goals I hope we can accomplish here. So as I go into hand and what I think about, there are a few things that come to mind. The first thing that I really think about is what Mr. B said earlier. You got your cash only guys, and I kind of define those as hustlers. And it's okay being a hustler in this business. I think we all start out in that phase of actually just want to hustle, just want to take those cash gains because we think there's a benefit. However, when I got into what I call my second phase of officiating, when I moved to Houston, Texas back in 2009, I realized that, hey, you know what? I want to do this on an annual basis. And anything that you're going to do on an annual basis, and A is my annual, you want to make sure that you got good books and records to actually keep that in check. Mr. B did a good job of elaborating on the income or the aspect of this profession. And I'm gonna throw out a couple what I call code sections because obviously just like refereeing, we got our case book, we have our rule book, we have our official manual. Obviously in the tax code, we live and die by our internal revenue code. So if you look at what code section 61, and obviously I don't want nobody to walk away trying to be a tax code head or being a CPA, but if you look at what tax code section 61 says, it basically says gross income is defined as all income from whatever sources derived, except for specifically excluded income. I can promise you, I can rest assure you that specifically excluded income is not officiating. So whether we get it in cash, whether we get it in check, whether we get it in the form of direct deposit, by definition, under the Internal Revenue Code, Section 61, that is gross income that we need to record. So what I think about there is, what I do is, and one of the gentlemen alluded to it earlier, I think the income piece is pretty easy to do, right? And when I first started out, I used to keep a little notepad, but then I graduated and started keeping it in Excel. I think it's very simple. We need to just get an Excel spreadsheet, date of every game you work in column 1. Column 2, put down the game that you worked. In column 3, put down the amount that you received for that game. And that'll recover you for all the amount that you made throughout the year. And I think that's very simple and easy to keep. Whether it's through doing red league ball, whether it's through AAU ball, whether it's through the association, whether it's through collegiate levels, etc. By keeping all of that in one central location, it's easy to track the income. One aspect that I think become a challenge in doing that, and I'm going to erase the hustler and the annual part, but one aspect that I think becomes a challenge is, if you look at the year 2019 to 2020, well, a basketball season runs from, I call it late October, early November through March of the following year. The reason I want to highlight that is most of all of us, we are what I call cash basis calendar year taxpayers, which means we don't pay taxes over a 2-year period. We actually pay taxes over a 1-year period. Most of us probably just filed our 2019 tax return. However, we wrapped up the 2019/2020 season. So if you would ask me from an income approach on the code section 61, what's going into my 2019 tax return, it's only that income that we earned in 2019. Those gains that we call in 2020, in January, February, March before COVID happened. Those are all items that go into our 2020 bucket. So it's important that on our spreadsheet that we put that date column down. So next year, when it comes time to report our income for that year, we just sort by 2020 and we pick up the income for that respective year. So that's the income approach of how I look at doing this and why it's important to keep track of it, because a basketball season gonna always lapse 2 tax return years. So we got to make sure that we keep 2019 with 2019 at and 2020 with 2020 at. That's the income approach. That code section 61. However, Mr. B did an absolutely good job of echoing another point. We don't have to just pick up all the income that we receive from our trade or business of officiating. There's another code section that I just put out there. It's code section 162. And it's a pretty simple, all-encompassing code section that, in my mind, you have wiggle room to actually penetrate it how you would like to. It basically says on the code section 162 that generally a taxpayer may deduct from gross income all of those expenses that are ordinary and necessary to conduct the trade or business. If we think about it, our trade or business is officiating. Mr. B hit on a lot of those, from insurance to your dues. But you think about it, and I had to do this just for my last tax return. You look at all the accounts you go to. I look at the accounts I went to in Chicago, the accounts I went to in Orlando, the accounts here in Texas I went to. I listed out similar how I did my income. I had a second spreadsheet that I called deductions or fees or expenses that I incurred in that year. I listed all my accounts. I listed out the account fee. I listed out the flights to get to the account. I listed out the hotel fees. And then I listed out all of those other incidental costs that I would have incurred while on that trip for camping purposes. Mr. B made a good point of it's getting hard to keep up with all these receipts. And obviously we are moving away from a quote unquote paper environment and moving to a paperless environment and doing a lot of things electronic. So what I do is, Mr. B made a point of it, I keep a credit card that has all of my expenditure on it. Book the flight on a single credit card, the meals on a single credit card. Obviously, count fees, very few counts actually take into consideration us allowing to be paid with a credit card. So whatever checks I send in, before I send the check in, I go ahead and make a copy of it. I put that check onto my application before I send it in, and I just put it to my records. And that way I can substantiate the camp I went to, the fee it was, and then I had it all in one place. So I always think we always get caught up in code section 61 and how much money we getting from hustling in this business of officiating. However, I will also want us to be mindful of all of those ordinary, necessary business expenses that we must incur. And man, just listen to Mr. B. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'm not here to say I'm a perfectionist and I always done this the right way, because when I started some years ago in Mississippi, it was about the H. It was about that hustler's mentality. You know, you think, hey, I can make all this money, and people tell you don't have to do all of that. And it really reminded me of those guys when you first start calling games and you get to the end of a 30-point blowout and the guy be like, hey, you ain't got to blow your whistle now. Like, no, I still got to do what's right by the book. And just like you still got to call a game to the zeros on the clock, well, we still need to report and do what's right and what's ethical. So that's the way I even guilty myself, and I done got to the point of where I am at the point now of, all right, let me be a better steward of how I'm actually reporting this. So code section 61, that's the income. 162, that's your deductions. And I think that's, like I said, a lot of wiggle room with what's ordinary and necessary to your business. You getting your uniform dry clean. Hey, that's an ordinary, necessary business expense in order to have your uniform how you want it. Your camp fees, your dues, your whistles, you name it, it's a part of it. So now there's only 2 other forms or numbers I'll throw at you. Mr. B mentioned one, the Form 1099. We already know that if you call at a certain location and you earn over $600, you're going to get that 1099. What I say is important about the 1099 is the fact that you want to make sure when you get that 1099 that it's in the right year, because that 1099 is also going to the IRS. So you want to make sure there's no discrepancy in your records versus what's on that 1099, just in case you have to call it out. And I apologize to say that a lot of times we want to turn this over to our financial advisor or our CPA, but I can rest assure you, this is nothing challenging, this is nothing difficult. Just like we take care of our physical health, I think we should also be good stewards of our financial health and making sure that we are staying on top of that. But in terms of the 1099, you want to make sure you track those because those going to the government. People say, well, Kevin, how they going to ever trace the cash? We'll get to that point in a second. But going to my end, it is necessary that we do all of this, especially the Form 1099s, et cetera, because those going to the government. The government, we file our tax returns where it says Mr. Bernard made $17,000 on this 1099. However, he's not reporting it on his Schedule C of his 1040. Somebody made a comment earlier about the Schedule C of the 1040 in terms of do you have to have an LLC set up to claim your expenses on the Schedule C. You don't have to have an LLC. We are all independent contractors, and we are operating what we identify as a business. We just report all our activity on that Schedule C. So there's a few things I want to just think about is Code Section 61 just says, hey, we got to report our income. Number 2 says, hey, we can deduct ordinary necessary business expenditures. We need to be mindful why we getting that Form 1099 and in what period do it need to go into. And then last is the Schedule C. We need to make sure that we can be able to explain what's on our Schedule C. And the reason I say all this is necessary is because Mr. B mentioned you might get audited. I mean, we all have sometimes by chance audits and sometimes we have deserving audits. But whatever the case is, if we actually get audited and we got the necessary paper trail, we got our Excel spreadsheets, we got our checks to support the accounts we went to. We got the credit card to store our statements of all the amounts we paid while we was taking these flights. If you got the documentation to support all this, audit in my mind is it's not nothing to be concerned about. We get concerned about audits when we normally not doing something that we should be doing the right way. So I would be definitely not fearful of all audits. And the last part of this is just it's just a decision. At the end of the day, you can say, hey, I get all the cash, so I'm going to do what I will do it my way. That's fine. We all have a decision we got to make in doing this. Because like Mr. B say, it don't just impact your officiating, just your tax return, but say someone's making $15, $20, $30, $50,000 doing this, right? Well, we trying to go buy a house. We trying to go buy a car. When we have to report that other income other than what we get from our actual employer, well, being able to support this other income actually will benefit us and probably getting lower interest rates and getting that loan that we are designed to get the appropriate finances. So we got to think about that it impacts more than just what we think it may impact. It actually have far outreaching impacts beyond that. So those are the main things I'll say we should be mindful of and consider. I think there might have been a few questions that came through.
Yeah, I'm gonna read it to you. So Danielle just asked when you had that mention when you were talking about what you do with your credit card. If you don't keep a credit card, what if you take a picture of the receipt? Will that do? Is there any other alternative method that we can use?
Oh, absolutely. Taking a picture of the receipt, paper. At the end of the day, paper trail. Just think in mind, you want to have that paper trail and that documentation to support it. That's all you want to be able to do is support if the question ever get asked. I mean, I would go out on a limb and say the chance of getting audited is low, but I would not say that being fair because you never can tell what may happen. But just keep the paper trail, keep the receipt, and that'll be just as fine as having the credit card statement.
Okay, Mike had an interesting question.
Hold on 1 sec.
Okay.
Also want to add to that is that a lot of folks don't realize as referees and us earning a lot of miscellaneous income, that's the red flag with the IRS. So as an independent contractor with miscellaneous income, knowing that all income is not reported, you want to keep your documentation. And if you do it in a monthly basis, even as Danielle said, if you want to take a picture and if you build a folder, you can take that folder and you can and put your documentation in it. As long as you're doing that, it's like now somebody asks you a question, you can always go back to your documentation to explain the question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ralph.
Okay. I know Stephanie wants the floor, but I'll just do this one last question. Mike had a great point where he said that corporations normally deduct entertainment expenses when they're normally doing business trips. If we are at camp or during the season and away from home to go to a baseball, basketball, and football game, is that something that's appropriate to get deducted as the cost of the ticket?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Kev.
I think me and Mr. B may have a difference of opinion on that one.
I have a question on this though too, guys. Like, because I just commented as well. Like, I had something on the side. I was a sole contractor too, but I think if it's what I was told from my accountant in the past, If it's basketball, you're a basketball referee. If it's basketball, technically, to a certain point, you can't go to 50 games if you're only reffing 10 games, because technically you're doing research. You're there to watch referees. It's a valid point. You can say tack it up as research, but I would think that if you're a basketball referee, you're going to a baseball game. I don't think that would be valid, simply because that's just really truly entertainment.
Yes. Go ahead, Kev.
I say two things to Steve's point, and I think Steve brought up a very good point, right? A lot of times when it comes to doing your taxes and I would consider myself a pretty aggressive taxpayer, right? And I would take aggressive positions. And to Steve's point, I think it was great. The fact that you highlight, I'm going to this game is part of my research and my development in order to get better. Well, you can almost support that as an ordinary and business expenditure under Section 162. But it's just the fact that you making sure that you willing to live with that risk. And if you ever get out of it, it probably can carry its weight throughout it, or it may not. But it's your risk appetite as well. But in terms of the corporate aspect of entertainment, I will just say this. They changed the rules in the last 2 years when tax reform came out. Whereas you used to be able to go out and deduct, quote unquote, 50% of those entertainment expenses on your tax return. Well, now under what they call the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they have now disallowed being able to take certain of those expenditures. So, absent getting very deep and granular into this, I would say when it comes to entertainment, I would hedge on the side of caution and not take those as deductions, because you don't want to just go on out raising a lot of red flags, especially when the rules have been changed under that particular code section.
I wanna piggyback something that both of you have said. Here in the United States, there are about 143 million taxpayers. The Internal Revenue uses an algorithm to determine whether or not you're eligible for an audit. And typically, the reason for an audit request to come up is when a taxpayer's adjusted gross income, the AGI, that is the number that's on the back side of the 1040 at the very top. When your adjusted gross income has increased by more than $25,000 in 1 year, you then go into a pool where there's then an algorithm run against your tax return. So in most cases, people's incomes do not fluctuate that much. It may at times. And if it does, that's when you go into the eligibility pool for an audit. The other thing I want to mention is when you're using your debit card and your credit card, every bank in the United States and most of the world, they use algorithms around your spending. That's why if you've gone in to use your debit or credit card, and you spent an item that cost $7,000 and you had never done that before, either the bank will stop the transaction and send you a text message and ask you, are you using your card for $7,000 or not? And please reply, or the call. So everyone in financial services is now using algorithms to check your spending habits and your likelihood of what you spend on a monthly and daily basis. The only other thing I want to mention quickly, and I'll turn it back over to Kevin and Bernard, is you need to determine what your monthly cash flow is. And that is your income less your monthly expenses gives you what we call undirected discretionary income. The reason why some of us are not wealthy is because we do not use our undirected discretionary income towards capital appreciation, retirement savings, or estate planning. The other thing I'm gonna say real quick as a bonus, when it comes to adequate protection, most people have too much life insurance. The type of protection that you want, that you will need during your working career, is disability income protection. Because if you were to get hurt on your job, in most cases, the corporate disability income protection plan usually provides about 70% of what your income normally is. And that's why people fall behind on their bills. They get sick, they suffer an injury, now they can't meet their mortgage, their rent, their car payments, and they're short. If you take $15 per month and subsidize and buy your own disability income protection plan, it will protect you. So that way, if you do become ill, or you break an ankle, or you tear your Achilles tendon, and now all of a sudden you're not officiating for like a season and a half, you've got some coverage against that income that you're normally used to receiving on a monthly or weekly or yearly basis. So if I were people who were especially young, who were between the ages of 25 and 50, life insurance is not the adequate protection product that you need. What you need is disability income protection. Thank you.
Joe, great job on that too. Joe is actually an auditor and head of an audit department that was with U.S. Trust, and him and I have worked together on projects, and he's another asset. And that's why we don't know in the officiating community why I like doing these type of things, because a lot of us have other jobs. That's that W-2 mentality. And because we do have that W-2 mentality, we got to share this knowledge with each other. There's a lot of referees who didn't know that they have certain things that they can deduct. That algorithm that we're talking about is something that what happens when you go into a bank and you open up a bank account and they ask you certain questions. They're setting up your KYC. A KYC is know your customer. And they will ask you, what if you got a W-2 or if you own a business, what is your expected income monthly? Because if that income comes into the account and it spikes, that algorithm is going to take you into what they call an AML or money laundering investigation. So a lot of these type of things, we want to know that as officials, we have a community of officials that have a wealth of knowledge, regardless of what city we're in or country we're in. We want to share that knowledge with us to get us on the page that we're able to do the right thing, even if we're telling somebody to raise their hand up high, blow your whistle a little bit stronger, how to belly out, how to stay in your primary, how to help out, where all of that come into the same part of the financial world. And that financial world is so important to us as officials that we need to understand how to do it correctly, or do it with enough knowledge of what the repercussions can be so you could be more prepared. As we would say, prevention officiating is a good officiating. So if you understand the financial world, that will help you to be a good steward of your finances. Because anytime that I even wrote something down, and Kevin brought it up, you get a 1099, and sometimes you keep it on your own records, and you're expecting it. And you're expecting this, and then the person who you did the gains for never sent you a 1099. So you say, I'm not going to claim it. And when you say, I'm not going to claim it, but he sent his copy to the IRS. So now the IRS got that they paid you this money, and you show and you come up in that report and you don't show it as income, you're red flag. So that's why it's important for you on a monthly basis, reconcile who you work for, reconcile what you should be getting at the end of the year of the 1099s you should be receiving for that year. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I would say is so important as well is do not wait until January, the end of January, to start thinking about this. When you get to November, start taking and closing out January, February, March. So when December comes and you got the holiday period, you can close your year end out for yourself. And when you close your year out for yourself, you're basically saying to yourself, oh, well, you know what? I'm almost done now. So I can go ahead and say, when I get my 1099s, I check them off. They're saying I got one from this company, this company, this company. And if you do that, you'll see how much better you're more organized when the 1099s all come in. Kev, do you want to add something before we let Steph go?
That's all. I just close it out with this. Obviously I used the hand acronym, but the main key with that was my just thought was while hustling, just be mindful of what you should be doing annually because it's necessary in order to help you make informed decisions. And this actual thought came from me from it was I almost had one of my Al Bautista moment where this actually came from me with something totally different. I was in Sunday school session a few weeks ago, and this actually made me think that this actually relates back to officiating. But Sunday school teachers had us draw a hand up and like, hey, whenever we studying the word, and I kind of correlated back to actually studying our officiating mechanics as well in our officiating books, that we need to hear it. That's the first thing we always do in count. We hear what's going on. Then we need to go read it for ourselves to make sure that it can be validated. But we all know there's a difference between reading and actually studying. So after we hear it, we read it, we study it, then we need to go memorize certain things. And then from the memorization, we need to go meditate on it. So it came from a Sunday school class, but then it came back to officiating. And now I end up using this in terms of financial literacy and officiating. So hopefully it was beneficial, but just wanted to share that with you.
Hey, Kevin, quick question.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The 3 columns that you said to put on an Excel spreadsheet, I haven't done that yet. I just want to get those 3 columns again. It's games worked.
Yeah, I will put down games worked in terms of I'll put down the date first, and that way you can make sure you got the right period. Was it 2019? Was it 2020? So the date. Next would be the actual game itself, and then the next one be just the amount I got from that game.
Okay, thank you.
It would be good to include the location, and then while you're on the spreadsheet, you can calculate your mileage and put that in another column. At Board 37, we hand out sheets to all of our referees, and it is the date, the subject matter, whether it's a game or whether you bought new referee shoes. The following column is mileage. Then if you were paying for gas, you want to have a column for amount. And then if you are doing a game, you want to have another column for mileage. So that way on a weekly or monthly basis, you can actually start to, stretch your spreadsheet out, put in mileage, put in the game, put in who played who at what location. And if you're being paid direct deposit, if you know what the high school rates are like they are here in New York and New Jersey, you can put in that amount knowing that you'll receive it based on the 1099 status for that year. But the most important thing I want everyone to take away before I stop talking here is that as an official, you should treat yourself like you own a McDonald's. You wouldn't have somebody walk into McDonald's, buy hamburgers and Big Macs, and did not record what they bought. So if you treat yourself like an incorporated business, whether it's a sole proprietor, partnership, or LLC, if you just think of yourself in that way, that fashion, Joe Thompson, Inc., then I'm going to be a lot more prudent about my spending, my revenue, what I'm putting my time into. In terms of internal revenue, many years ago I worked for them. The name of the game is documentation. You got documentation, there's nothing to worry about. If you are trying to pull things out of your butt and you're making it up, you got problems. Because internal revenue is like a pit bull. They grab onto your pant leg and they don't let go. Thank you.
Thanks.
I would also just put just in that spreadsheet, like just the type. If you went on a trip, if it's for a meal, if it's for your hotel payment, I would just include that as well as the amount, and then kind of another comment field.
Right, because if you're going to camp, it should be considered training.
Right.
So you want to make sure that if you're attending a camp, it's training. If you're going to an IABO board meeting, it's training. So you have to be able to differentiate what the items are. But Steve makes a good point. The more that you can spell out your activity, the better it is. It'll be easy for you to recall it. I tell people all the time, I'm not good at lying, so I don't try to lie. I speak the truth. If you speak the truth, you don't have to worry about trying to remember it.
I got a question, actually. I don't know if sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Steve.
For 2 things. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Joe. We can itemize training as a business expense, correct? Okay. And
buy a new referee shirt, that's an expense. You buy new pants, that's an expense.
Even cleaning them after you dry clean them,
the
that
uniform,
counts. Yep.
that's expense. If you dry clean the uniform, it's an expense.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Yeah. I had a second question, but having a brain fart. Go ahead, Steve.
I have a question, Joe. I don't know if you or Kevin may know. You mentioned like retirement planning and stuff like that.
Right.
Like I work for a company, so I have my 401k. It's
Right.
all pre-tax.
Right.
If you set up some type of IRA, or say even you put $15-20 a month in there, can you deduct that from your total taxable income?
The total amount per year is $22,000.
Yeah.
All right. Whatever vehicle it's in, the total amount per individual is $22,000. But the one thing I will say to this for everybody that's on the call, if you work for a company that has 401ks, because in the old days, most companies had pension plans, defined benefit pension plans, or defined contribution pension plans. If you're in a 401k, the best way that you can say, most companies say, if you put in 6%, we'll give you 3%. Well, the last firm that I spent 12 years at, I was putting in 10%. Even though I wasn't getting any matching from them, I used it as an innate savings tool. So every year that I got a new raise and a bonus, I added another % to my withholding. And it's money that I'm not even looking at. So that way you're actually saving more. You might be having a little bit of a tax exposure on the other percentage points above 6%, but it's okay. Because again, it's money that I'm saving. See, the whole goal behind a 401k is it's there to lower your adjusted gross income. Along with the accrual, the way that it helps people preserve themselves for retirement is you are lowering your adjusted gross income, so you're getting tax minimization. And then at the same time, you're getting interest and accrual on the money, on the principal, because the big money managers, invest in the money for you, whether it's John Hancock, Merrill Lynch, whoever it may be.
Absolutely. Hey, Steph, would you like to add something, please?
I would love to. First of all, before I begin, I gotta give a shout out. Someone recently had a baby. Congratulations, Kevin just had a baby. Yeah. I wanted to make sure we acknowledge that, before I get started. So congratulations, first and foremost. And thank you, Joe, Steve, Mr. Bernard. Someone else spoke up and I'm missing the name right now. But guys, this is not a fun conversation. But if you want to be a referee, quite frankly, and I don't care if you don't want to do it at the collegiate level or whatever level, prepare yourself to be audited. I'm just going to say it flat out because of the red flags that Mr. Bernard has mentioned. I have been audited. I am no longer scared of being audited. It's a part of the business. I know other referees who've been audited as well. And as a result of their experiences, I got quick, fast, in a hurry, my stuff in order. And what I realized when I started, I was working for Verizon. So it was under a W-2. And I just did what I did. I deducted things and I was like, I got a receipt here. I might have one there. But I will say this, if you want to be a professional, as I believe Joe just mentioned, the way you walk into a McDonald's, you pay for a meal, you receive a receipt. Conduct yourself as a business, even if you do not have an LLC. I'm gonna try to make this quick because I wrote down as many notes as I possibly could because everything that has been stated, I have experienced, literally. I've been audited. I have been denied credit. As a result of refereeing on a full-time basis. This is a very true story. I was trying to go buy a car, not really thinking about, what the implications were, but as a result of working under 1099s, I had 1,000 1099s from all of these different places, and it immediately raised the red flag from my local credit union. And I will be honest, and this is a factual story, I don't mind sharing the documentation. My credit score was 790, and I still got denied because of the red flags. We work in a business where we receive a lot of 1099s and incomes from all over the place. Mr. B raised another point about not receiving your 1099s. One of the things that I do now, I don't have to worry about it as often because I have better documentation in place, is that I did at the beginning, I I didn't go back at the end of the season and basically do a true up. So I claimed X income. The IRS said, no, 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 you have this. And I'm like, but here's all the documentation. What happened? I was missing three 1099s from universities. I wasn't trying to lie. And Joe said, I'm not a good liar, first of all, because my conscience will keep me from it. But more importantly, I'm a terrible liar. But I didn't realize I had other money out there. So as someone just mentioned a moment ago, at the beginning of the season, at the end of the season, at the end of the year, it's your responsibility to take your time, go through Excel by Excel, or excuse me, month by month in an Excel, and get all that information so that you can submit that documentation. All the universities and the various different corporations and businesses are required to submit to the IRS wages and income. I now request my wage and income statements on purpose every single year to ensure that there isn't some income that I'm missing as a result of just not receiving a 1099. Most of them are now submitted electronically so we can avoid those issues, but it does happen and it might happen to you, so prepare yourself. The other thing I would say is the way you start at the rec ball level is how you'll perform at a college ball level. So that goes for your on the court business as well as your off the court. So if you maintain great records with summer ball, rec ball, AAU, pro-am, whatever, you'll then be able to translate that over to your high school games, your college games, et cetera, et cetera. I do know a situation where a coordinator had to let someone go because the IRS flagged that individual and they went to the coordinator. This is a very true story. So be clear that if you're doing something behind the scenes or shady, it's gonna always catch up with you, whether it be manipulating a game or manipulating your documentation or your income and wages. The last thing I'll say is I've gotten very savvy over the years. When I first started this, someone asked about not using credit cards. And quite frankly, we do a lot of business. And I love, for one thing, giving stuff for free. So as a result of what we do, we travel a lot. Whether you buy groceries for your family, there are credit cards out there that will give you stuff for free for doing exactly what it is that you do every day. Now I say that, and I mention that because it requires a lot of discipline. Every year, I take a full week-and-a-half vacation based on the points and perks that I've earned as a result of my credit cards. I don't pay a dime. It's because I'm disciplined. Every month, I use Amex for one reason alone, because if you put it on the card, you got to pay it off. And as a result of that, it's number one, built my credit score up extremely high. And then number two, it's added additional perks that I get to take advantage of because I'm doing what it is that I already have to do. I'm doing their regular business expenses. So we buy a lot of gas, we buy a lot of groceries. There are various different cards out there, and I'm by no means an expert, but I'm just telling you there's a way to do this and do it really, really savvy. But it all begins with discipline. And again, if this is the business that you want to be in, or what you want to do, whether it is at the lower level or you aspire to go all the way up to the top, it requires you to be truthful. You have to stand in your truth. So I said at the beginning, I have no problem with being audited. I have nothing to hide. I got Excel spreadsheets on top of Excel spreadsheets because I'm disciplined. And I now know that it's just a part of the business. It is what it is. I want to thank Mr. Bernard because I've been camping for years. And I can count on one hand how many times I've had this conversation with other coordinators, other campers, other staff members publicly. There are conversations behind the scenes maybe, but there aren't a lot of people talking about how to handle your business off the court and how to be successful. And then last but not least, I meant to say this a moment ago, Arbiter will allow you to pull your schedule down in a Excel format so you can easily pull it. And it's already laid out. You just add the additional columns that Kevin mentioned. So there's not a lot of guesswork. You can make this really easy. And there are a couple apps out there that will help. I heard Vic mention tracking your mileage, which is absolutely spot on, that will track your mileage. The moment you get into the car, it'll start It'll ping once you start moving. It registers that you're moving. And once you get to your destination, you've stopped, you'll get a text message. It'll say, is this a business related travel expense? You either click the button yes or no, and it'll track it. There are tools out there. You got to ask the questions, and you got to be willing to be disciplined so that you are familiar with what will happen if you get audited. It's not as scary as you think if you have the documentation. Thank you, Mr. Bernard. I just had to get that off my heart.
Oh, Steph, I loved it, and thank you so much. You brought up another point, and a big point that what you talked about is being audited is nothing to be afraid of. If you do your documentation and put your documentation in order, like I said, come November, that Thanksgiving weekend, as you're stuffed up and can't move, start pulling January, February, and reconcile that. And a big thing that I always say is when January comes, everyone you have worked for that's a 1099 scenario must have that sent out by January 31st. So if you jump and run in there to do your taxes on January 15th and you don't know your numbers, you may get audited because, like Steph said, and I've been audited, and I'm happy because to me, it's like clarifying everything that I know about because I work in the industry as well, like Joe and Steve and Kevin. You like to go in and compare notes. And when you go in and your stuff is in documented order, and when they ask for certain things, it's generally from the Schedule C that they're looking for. And what you want to do is to understand this too, is that when you send in that tax return and you don't give them that dollar amount and you miss it, and the next year you go to claim it, they may charge you interest on that tax return.
Will.
Not maybe, will charge you interest on that tax return.
Yeah,
so we have to be able to understand the discipline, the order, and accountability. You got to be accountable for your work that you're paid for and to also make sure that it's put down. I was audited by trusting someone because as you are a person in finance, you always want your work to be done independent. You don't want it done by yourself sometimes, okay? So as much as people want to do their own, when you do it independently and the person's supposed to be a CPA, you just sit down and don't look at it. My accountant put down $169,000 in travel. It should have been $69,000 because I was traveling a lot that one year. That ran a red flag. And to find out I got audited because that algorithm popped. That got called in, and when I showed them, I had to pay a penalty. So what I paid as miscellaneous income, I had to pay out. My tax return for that year should have been $40,000. I paid initially only $20,000. So I had to turn around and pay another $20,000 plus interest. So I was fortunate that I put that money in that year on the shelf to pay that $25,000. So all I'm saying to you is, in all of these scenarios, sometimes you have to double check your financials against your spendings. So if you look at your spending habits and you look at your expenditures, if they don't equal out to what you have on your 1099s total, then there's a red flag by whoever did your taxes.
And that's a good point, Mr. B. When I first started, I decided it was, I could do TurboTax on my own. I can click a few buttons. And so for several years, I was doing it on my own. What I realized is I did need the backing of a tax professional, simply because I was, again, starting to get so many 1099s that I just needed an extra bit of cushion to make sure if I were audited, I'd have somebody that could go forward and represent me. So I want to say that be mindful that even now that I'm working with a tax attorney, and she and I have been working together for 3 years, She now gets it. But when I first approached her, she was like, oh yeah, I can do this. And she admitted, I'm an anomaly, that
Right.
but this is not a normal way to do business. It's not that I'm an exclusion. I'm just not like her other clients. But there are some accountants out there that have, this is not crazy. There are other small business owners that have the same amount of travel expenses and so on and so forth. But recognize, just going to your random run-of-the-mill H&R Block, this is no disrespect to anybody, but we do something that may be a little bit different than what they've experienced. So be prepared to either A, shell out just a wee bit more money. You want quality, you're gonna have to pay for it. Or B, go find somebody that is qualified to help you. There are plenty of referees out here, and there are folks like Kevin and others who know how to get the job done. And we've all, I learned through trial and error. I'll be honest, there was more trial at the beginning and error, but now I know the value of basic documentation to the point where I block out a day, meaning I have a day on my schedule every month where I will not accept a game. That's how serious I am about it, because I know the odds of me getting audited are there, but I also make sure that, of course, I let all my assignments come out and they are what they are, but I make sure I have my day that I am just simply there collecting receipts and making sure I have all the documentation. And this goes back to my point about a good credit card. Amex does a great job of spitting all that information out at the end of the year, and it's just a smooth summary. So I just send that right on over to my tax attorney, and we don't even have to debate about anything anymore because the documentation is there, and they take a little bit of the headache off your shoulders. So there are resources, but you have to ask the questions. And this is one of those not fun questions. Everybody wants to know how to pick up the pivot foot, but no, how do you do your taxes is equally important, and be financially savvy.
Great,
Thank
you.
Mr. B.
Steve,
Thank you.
Steve, you want to give us a little bit?
Yes, definitely. Just to kind of go on the top of that, like, I think that's a really important point. Two of them, actually, one on the credit card, one on the accountant. On the accountant, I agree with you. Like, I think it's worth it. Like, I started my own independent business a few years ago. I had done TurboTax on my own. I did this and that. And then when I actually got an accountant, you're right. You have to pay a lot more money than if you pay, hey, say $50 to do TurboTax. But they're professionals. Like, this is what they do. So what they can do is, you know, if you sit with them, spend the whole day, go through all of your details with them, bring in all those Excel sheets, bring in those receipts. They also know, they know the rules. This is their job. Like, they know, even if you go to them and say, look, I made $50,000, you might have expenses that are $49,000, truly. But they're going to say, you can't write all of those off just because it's going to raise a red flag, like, you know, Joe and Bernard, all of you guys have said earlier. They know what those, you know, kind of, again, that's not going to guarantee you're not going to get audited. But they know what those flags are, so they know to say, you know, let's limit this, let's lower this. And they also know that there's a lot of stuff that you can write off, as you guys have all said. They know what those are. You know, like, you would never think of something like dry cleaning. You can write off dry cleaning. You can write off the meals with, you know, if you take your crew out, you can write off those meals. All of those things can be written off that if you may not think about, but if you're below what you may be able to write off, they're gonna ask you about those. They're gonna jog your memory. So in reality, I remember the first year I did my own, I went to this person, I did my taxes, and I got like $500 back. I actually wound up doing them for a few years on my own as well, and then I took them to the account, I compared. They were getting 4 or 5 times the amount back at the end of the year to me, just because they knew the rules. They knew the thresholds. They knew what wasn't going to raise a red flag. And again, like you said, I think it's 1% chance of getting audited if you're an independent contractor. I think it's like 2.5%. So it's a chance. But having these guys know the rules is a huge just relief, and it really can kind of save you money, even though up front, like you said, you're going to pay 3, 4, 5 times the amount of like a TurboTax, but they're going to really, you know, they're going to dot all your I's, cross all your T's for you, and you're going to be confident and comfortable. And as they get to know you after those years as well to develop that relationship, they're going to, you know, help you out even more.
Great.
And so then, like, the second thing is just the credit cards you had mentioned. Like, again, I think that's a huge thing. I do the same thing with points. I get tons of points. We go on vacations with them. But the important thing is American Express, like you said, is good. Is just be careful. If you've never had a credit before, if you're just kind of, one, what the credit card does is, like you said, a lot of these are a cash business. You get paid in cash. You need to establish credit. Even if you don't use your credit card that often, just get one. You know, when you again go look to purchase a house, you go look to purchase a car, like, you'll have that credit established, especially for, you know, some of the younger guys. But just be mindful that some of those credit cards out there, similar to that predatory lending you were talking about, they may make sure you don't overindulge. You know, like make sure you pay it all off in full, because you might buy something and all of a sudden you have this credit card and you put all of your expenses on there. But if you don't have the money in your bank account to pay those expenses off the first month, you're all of a sudden going to start accruing 15, 20, 25% interest, which adds up more quickly than what your actual bills are. So, you know, like the American Express is so good because you do pay it all in full. So you don't have to accrue. So, but some of those other, like the Capital One, they're great cards. I have those. You get a lot of points. But make sure that you have the money in your bank account, especially when you're starting out. You can pay all those things off in full, because the last thing you want to do is have $200 in expenses, can't pay it off, and then all of a sudden you're getting $50, $60, $70 in interest rates every month, interest fees every month. If you just get behind the 8 ball, you can never pay them off. So like those are the two things like I would definitely kind of touch base. I would definitely you know, get the account, get the credit card, and like you guys have all said, just be honest. I mean, you can write a lot of stuff off if you know you're learning. You can write all these things off. You may have an inkling, be like, oh, I went out with my friends. Let me write that off as you know, we talked about basketball. Write that off. Don't get greedy. Ultimately, it's not going to be worth it. And so again, like you guys, like Joe, I know you mentioned, like you're going to get caught. You know, those things like the accountants they're smarter than us. The IRS is smarter than us, frankly, when it comes to this stuff. They know what the red flags are. Make sure you know you don't get greedy. You have all your receipts. And you know, you talk to a professional, because even though you're going to pay up front, like it really, in the long run, it will save you guys a lot of money. And you know, you may have a good account. Like I have a good account. If anyone wants them, she's great. She, you know, works with a lot of individuals. You know, the bunch of people on here who have them. You know, ask them. You know, ask some of our colleagues who is a good account who can help with this profession, because like you said, it is pretty unique. So.
All right.
Just to
Great, Steve. Thank you. I want to shout out 1 second, Zach. Before and don't write it down, so don't forget to come back. I have a guest on, and some people have left. TJ, would you say hello to us? And he's all the way up in Maine, and he's the one who helps us put out our rules and as far as putting our stuff together. TJ, would you please tell us a little bit about what you do for Bball and what we work together and all that other kind of stuff? I want you to say hello.
First of all, I want to thank you for tonight's session. This is outstanding. This is probably the first time I've ever seen this topic. I think it's a much needed topic, and I'm really glad you did this. This is outstanding. I'm the co-coordinator of officials for the IBO. I've been in the job for about 4 years now, and basically I spend my days creating materials for officials like you to help you try to get better. We try to do pregame cards, and we put a lot of videos together. All the information you see coming out, the plays of the week and the inside the lines. I spend a lot of time with those kind of things, so that's my role here. But I think this is a much needed topic, and I hope we can expand on this and maybe hopefully have some of the experts we had tonight in a different format, maybe at a seminar at some point.
We'll talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, that's great. Outstanding.
Great. Steve, down there in Austin, how are you tonight? Give us a little bit.
Doing good. This was a wonderful session. As TJ said, it was very timely and much needed. It's a topic that people don't pay attention to, but they need to pay attention to. But shout out to Stephanie, Kevin, yourself, Steve, and Ralph.
All right. Al Batista, you out there? Okay. Zach, you had a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment to what was discussed about credit cards. Actually, just by coincidence, I probably took out, applied and got approved for like 3 credit cards right around the time I actually got into officiating. And what I did was my parents recommended that I apply for credit cards where I had 1 year to pay off any expenses without interest. So I recommend that for anybody who looks into applying for cards, just to take out something where you have a 12-month payment plan. And I've seen appreciation in my credit scores over the last 2 years. Also, I just had a question about the record keeping. Getting back to that, obviously for our bookkeeping, but also to make sure that our 1099s are accurate when December ends, right? Because our season extends
Absolutely.
calendar year, right? So that's just that is just for cross-checking purposes.
Absolutely. You want to make,
accurate.
you want to walk into the new year understanding, okay, for a fact, you work for me, you got a 1099 for me. So what you did in January or February, we shut down in March, right? If you look at your schedule now, if not going back basketball wide until next year, you will know how much you've earned from me. So when I get ready to send you a 1099, you have just reconciled yourself to what you expect. Second, if you didn't get a 1099 from me, because quote unquote, it was lost in the mail, you still know the amount that you should claim because you have already known what you have worked. So if you did it on a monthly basis, you're able to reconcile yourself to what you may call a monthly statement of your expenditures. Your income is your P&L for that month, if that makes sense. You and I can talk a little bit. Anyone else that chooses to want to say hello to me, and I can send you some spreadsheets to help you work on monthly expenditures, whatever. If you need help, Kevin is also available. I'm telling you that he is. He may not be available right now. He just had a baby, and he's excited. He may be tired, but we thank him for him coming on and helping us to go through some of this side of it. But I know that we're all here to assist each other. So I thank you all for all your support and getting on and sharing this topic. We're not going to be here next week. We're going to be back the following week after the Labor Day. And I got a hot topic coming up for that too. And I'm not going to tell you right now until you get the text, until you get your email. But I look for these things because it keeps us engaged. It keeps us thinking. Right now, we understand that, you know, there's a lot of basketball that's not being played. And we're looking for the refereeing side of it. But if we keep our mind set on some of the things that's going to help us to become better officials when we get back on the court, with all of this education around communicating with each other, the one thing that we should be able to do is learn to listen and communicate. And if we can do that during this time, we are going to be better officials, especially on the listening side. With that being said, I'd like to take a moment before we close and wish Jacob Blake a speedy and healthy recovery as best as he can from all the things that have transpired in the last few days. So I wish him the best and his family, and I wish all of you the best, and thank you again for all your support and what we have done. Thank you. Mr. Modest, you would like to say anything before we close?
Hey, Bernard, this was awesome, buddy. This was exceptional. My spouse really takes care of all my taxes and recording my games and stuff, especially with the IRS, preparing my tax returns. But this information was priceless, man. This was a job and something that, as an official, we need to be literate and really understand how to maximize incomes, because it's not how much you make, it's how much you're able to keep of what you make that really counts. So again, kudos to you, Bernard.
Thank you. Mike, are you out there still?
I'm still here.
Hey, man, thank you so much for what you are doing in the referee community. Tell me how you like tonight, and if you have any questions.
No, hey, Bernard, this is great. I have, you know, like some of the folks have said, I've had some backdoor conversations, but it's never been laid out this clear. And I think this is valuable for everybody. And, you know, I think, you know, like TJ had said, you need to take this to another level and take this to a clinic or to the IBO convention, and you got to let people know this, because this is a huge help. So thank you for taking the time to go over it.
Absolutely. So with that being said, if anybody would like to say something before we close, again, I am open. Send me an email, and hopefully that we do send out some emails, and if I can help and give direction, if I can't get the answer, trust me, I can get someone to get the answer for you. And I love doing it. So please call my number.
Bernard?
Yes, sir.
Bernard, it's Al. Outstanding job. This was phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Kevin, thank you. Stephanie, this is a phenomenal job.
Thank you, sir.
Bernard, Vic, Joe Thompson touched upon something that is an unbelievable gem. And he talked about a 401k, which is a tax shelter. And hopefully, in sometime in the future, he can expound on that, because that is definitely a jewel for individuals at the age of 35 and getting older, and every year adding to it. It's definitely an unbelievable tax shelter and an unbelievable vehicle when you become 59 and above.
Yes.
Great point. That's a great
Well
point. I'm going to tell you something to add to it. And you don't want to put it in there and take it out before 59 and a half. So I will add that to the next financial one that we do, because when you take it out early, you're paying taxes like 3 times on it. And am I right, Kevin?
True statement.
Here we go. So hey,
don't worry about the market either. The market's gonna, if it goes up and down, let it ride. We're young enough.
That's right.
We're in no hurry.
Okay.
Well,
all right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all for a great night, and I appreciate
Great job,
it.
Bernard. Alex Jones, great job.
Hey, Bernard, really quick,
how
I
are
just
you?
want to make an announcement.
I'm good, sir.
Yes. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, first of all, thank everybody that really contributed. This was a special thing that I always thought was going to be with Bernard at the helm. I'm just going to put this up on YouTube really quick. And, I think in the beginning for me as an official, I had somebody that always told me to treat officiating as a business. Not all referees are privy to that information early on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that link up, and I would implore you to share it with any other newer official or older official that might not be put onto this stuff, because I think this is very important. This is a great reflection of getting a referee into the business mindset, and I think it's important. So me and Bernard will set up an email. That way you guys can share it. It'll be up as a link on YouTube.
That'll be great.
Thank you. Ralph just took over my website, and he's actually updating it. And he said he wants to make a little bit more, and he's trying to tell me I'm an old man now. But I'm going to be happy to see what he does with it. And we're going to be putting up some of the pods and stuff. Modest, you're getting ready to do your podcast, and we're looking forward to doing it with you. Ralph and I will be doing your podcast with you. So we're hoping to get you in this weekend or early next week.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you all, and everybody have a blessed evening and a good holiday, and I will be sending it out the day after Labor Day.
Okay, be
Good night.
careful.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening.
Good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Bernard.
Thanks,
Thank
team.
you.
Thank you, Bernard.
Guys,
Thank you.
Kevin.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, folks. Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, Mike.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.